Welcome back to the glitch. Um, I was coming up with some ideas and different thoughts around just what I've been seeing, what's been happening, and ironically enough, this seem like this might actually seem kind of hypocritical, I think, in a way, but just follow me. Um, no more talking heads, and I actually looked up that term and actually what it meant, and it more so related to in like news or media, essentially where you have kind of what you're looking at right now with me. Basically a person, usually a close-up um, image and camera kind of in the face and talking, sharing some type of news, insight, updates. But I think what we see right now is it's happening a lot. Um, and definitely in the spaces where I kind of focus on and frequent, which, primarily education, technology, really getting heavier into the AI space and creation and producing things and uh, creativity, and even, talking about business, etc. So, not to say that news and information updates, resources that people are talking about and kind of sharing is a bad thing because it's not. But the problem, I think, is number one, there's just a lot of information. There are a lot of people, I think, in a lot of cases, who are essentially just like saying what they've heard or sharing like snippets of, something that, may have been written or, put out into the world or whatever. Especially when talking about education, for example, with what's the best instructional techniques or routines, curricula, and what's the best approach to teaching and learning. Even in some of the more communication or relationship type of aspects, within, a school setting or district or whatever. A lot of times there's just, again, even with that, you could just get like the headline of whatever article was brought out and, maybe not necessarily get the true depth and understanding of what was actually shared. But then even further than that is really, I think a lot of times the kind of the lack of the practical aspects of things. And, you know, I always talk to people about my background in chemistry. And one thing I always like to continue to emphasize in conversations that I'm talking with people about, again, practical application is that it didn't really, I don't want to say it didn't matter, but things didn't really become real until I went into the lab in chemistry, right? Like you can go and sit through the lecture. You can read the book. You can do the practice problems, right? You can even see the theoretical, modules or animations or whatever, right, online. None of that equates to actually going into the lab environment, having to pour chemicals yourself, right? Do the appropriate measurements and take the necessary precautions, right? Even when it comes to safety measures, right? One of the initial preparations for going into any lab was always taking the time to do the research on the hazards, right, of the any chemical I'd be working with, right, like the material safety data sheets, MSDS, and having to go through and literally write out every single chemical, write out every single hazard related and associated with that chemical, even if there were no hazards known. Um, but then going in and then actually executing that particular experiment. Funny thing is, like, water was probably in every experiment just about. And I had to actually write out the the associated non-hazards of water, right? H2O, right? Chemical compound. So again, the theoretical components of it, or those approaches, right? What people think might happen, or one-off stories or narratives that we've heard versus lived experience. And again, that can go into the education space when we're talking about even going now, kind of pivoting into job market focus. I shared something on LinkedIn uh, recently, I guess a day or two ago, really talking about the experience with going through the trial of being laid off from a job, but then also, well, what was the practical, process, right? What were the steps that actually led to, eventual, we'll say, success, right? Moving out of that situation into a better one, landing a full-time role. What was the gray area, right? The kind of dash in the middle, in between that, those dates, right? That timeline, and that was basically, um, you know, layoff, unemployment, contract work, work your way up, add your information, add new resources, upskilling, all that to the resume as you're applying for the roles that you really are seeking, right? Full time, benefit option types of roles and responsibilities and opportunities, and then moving into that, right? Stepping kind of up based on the upskilling, based on the experience and the skills that you're able to get through working, something in more a more kind of contractual basis, we'll say, and then landing a new role, like steps, practical. Here's what I did. Here's how you can, succeed, right, and move forward. Not just, here's the nature of the job market, and the current stats say, people are getting hired here, but and not to again to take away from that, but there's just a lot of information. Uh, you can easily get caught up in just the factoids that are constantly flowing. And the interesting thing about it is that, it's all about, uh, I guess, in essence, like garnering attention too, right? Even if you're listening and, watching this video, like it is about attention, right? That's the important thing. There's so many different mediums that are pulling, right, at, your attention. Look over here, watch this, listen to this. Um, but the question is always like, well, why? Why why should I do that? Why should I pay attention? Why should I listen to you? And what value is there? So when I'm saying now no talk, no more talking heads, it's like, all of the kind of, let me just walk you through these updates and, all this stuff. If everybody's saying the same thing, you don't need to hear it 50 times. You need to get it once and then figure out, well, what does this mean practically? Does this even matter? Right? Like all of these AI tools, right? People create comprehensive lists of 1,000 tools. They give them to you in a Google Drive. Here's a link to, this Google Drive full of, links to all these AI tools or resources or whatever. You drive yourself crazy trying to trying to actually go into that drive and give each one of those resources, tools, just a fair shake, right? In terms of use case. Furthermore, what's not really being said is most likely the majority of those things are probably not going to withstand the test of time anyway. So you're pouring your time and energy into learning something and learning to use something that in 30, 60, 90, 180 days, you might not be able to use it anymore. So then it's like, well, then what? So then it's like, all right, well, what should we be using? One of the recommendations I've given on, I guess, one of these kind of rants that I've done before is um, look at it from the perspective of investing or the stuff that you use all the time, right, on a regular basis, right? If we look at our daily life, where is all of most people, right? Where is that focus going? And not to say that that's going to always be perfect and right, but again, from the financial and like investing perspective, it's you know follow the whales, right? Where are the most, I guess, highly propped up or successful even like investors positioning themselves, right? If Warren Buffett's pouring his money into something, more than likely it might be worth a look. I'll say that, right? So think about those things, right? Versus all of the new and shiny things that become available and accessible. Um, so again, a lot of just stuff that's going to continue to roll out. Um, Blocking out the noise is extremely important, especially when we're looking at and thinking about production or productivity, creativity, and putting things out. Because with the idea of the talking heads, right? Interestingly enough, if you're doing so much consumption of information, of resources, and things like that, there's a likelihood that you're not necessarily producing as much or moving because you're trying to take in more information. In a lot of instances, I've personally found with myself and others that you don't you don't really need more information a lot of the times. Um, you just need to execute on what you have. So if you have, we'll say, 1 to 3 solid sources of information, of insight that you can pull from, you might have enough, right? Like because I mean everybody's kind of reporting the news, if you will, kind of at different times. It's still the same information in most cases, right? You just might get it faster from one place or another, but the insights going underneath those things, the actual application, how does this help me? How can I personally leverage this thing or this tool or this idea or this resource or whatever um, for my benefit? Because that's what I find, right? People, and this is just, I guess, human nature, self-preservation is important. But people want to know how things can benefit them, right? Like just being real, like what have you done for me lately, type of thing. Um, so talking about like the process and giving like backstory, even when I'm sharing some of this stuff, I'm like, I know people don't necessarily care about this, but I'm going to share it anyway, especially if it's something that is more, um, I would say, applicable to real world circumstance and scenario. And again, anecdotal experience, but those experiences could be related to somebody else in the present space we're in or in the future. So again, telling stories and narrative is still important, but you got to go beyond that. And again, no more talking heads. There's a lot of conversations, which is great, necessary for sure. However, going back to the same idea, one of the, I think, just kind of, I don't know if you would call it a slogan or whatever, that I personally have began to focus on. I don't think I came up with it, so I'm not going to claim it, but one that I really stand firmly on, I guess, and beside or whatever, is problems are great talking points, solutions are great action points. So all well and good to listen to people and get information and insight and all the stuff, but I would say that we need to draw into question, um, whenever those same people, those same sources of information, the same talking heads can't point you to actionable insights of what they've actually done or what they've helped other people do. Again, not a judgment, but that's just me, right? I'm not going to talk about, I don't know, registering a trademark as much or as in depth or with as much moxie and energy um, as I would if I'm somebody who has registered a trademark. Because I understand what that, I know what that process is like, and it's a thing, right? So if you've been through those things and you can speak to them and give people actual, right, the actual factuals, right, in terms of insight. This is what the process looks like. This is how it's going to be broken down. It might take this much time, so on and so forth. Like that's great. Um, but still, with the idea of building in mind, because it's still people right now, especially with jumping now into tech and AI, more exclusively, with regard for using the technology, using these resources, all these chat bots and all this stuff. But it's like that, it's all great. But whenever somebody comes to you, myself, whomever, and says like, well, what was the point? Why do I need this? Where's the value? They should get a solid answer, I would think. Here's a key example. Um, I actually in Green Digit Academy, blackaimedia.com. One of the webinars that's available in that kind of learning portal that I set up of like webinars and tutorials using tools, resources, things for creating your own resource, your own, say, merchandise and, even, stuff like this, producing this type of thing, um, brand esque related stuff. Uh, just really ways to move into more of like the production role, I'll say, versus like consumption. Um, One of the webinars I have that I did a while back is on domains, right? It's called Somebody Stole My Name. And the premise of that is a question that I like to ask people related to the domain conversation is, do you own your name? Right? First, last, or some variation of that. Dot com dot whatever, right? At the end. Because I mean, again, it's an interesting thing, even related to not even what you would do with it right now, but potentially. Right? You might not need a website right now. You might not even have an idea for a brand or a business or what have you. Um, but what happens if and when you do, and you go to whatever site and resource or platform, and you try to find your name as a domain? I mean, you got to pivot, I guess. Now you got to figure out other brand name, whatever. But for me, especially me and somebody who has created somewhat of like well, been a part of, I'll say, and then also continued somewhat of like a legacy name being passed on. Now owning that, that's another just, I guess, minor piece of like ownership and something that can be leveraged for different purposes at certain points, right? Um, but again, that's just a quick thing that I don't necessarily hear a lot of people talking about. Um, but it is pretty like straightforward and pretty simple, and a lot of people do it, which is amazing. But it's not necessarily a common conversation that a lot of folks are just even having, and it's something that it's, I mean, honestly, it's extremely simple in nature. But there's that. Um, so again, going from just talking about stuff, just sharing information, just, saying, "Oh, well, here's this thing that came out. Did you get this update? Did you, see what happened at the, whatever is, it has to go to the next level and phase, which is application. And for a lot of people who, especially now, have not necessarily been engaged with or been introduced to a lot of the technological tools and advancements, we'll say AI here. For those people, some of the apprehension lies in, I don't think that can help me. I'm not technical enough to apply that. It has no direct correlation or immediate application to my life for the betterment of my situation, which is not true in a lot of ways, a lot of cases, a lot of instances. Right? The efficiency and the things like that that can be leveraged by people who really need it or could really use it to learn, the actual technology, right? Like the all the writing tasks that people have been automating and things like that for, how long now? Past few years. Like you mean to tell me that, you know, your average everyday person, because I think the last time I was had this conversation or was doing this type of rant here with, doing the glitch. I think the stats I looked at were like, roughly 49% of Americans, and I think the age range is 18 to 65, um, are using AI. And of those, the majority are super users, right? Which means that they use it every day. So these are not like new or once in a while, every now and then type of people who get on to a AI tool or resource and uses it for like just this project for right now. It's like, no, they probably use it every day, have the apps on their phone. These things are becoming second nature, right? Like ChatGPT is essentially taking somewhat of the place of, dare I say, Google when it comes to search online, as are some of the other tools and resources that are, I would say, competitives or in that same conversation. But for a lot of people, it's like, well, how do they get introduced to that, right? What are we actually sharing with them? Is it just a conversation? Is it just a talking head on the screen and they're, telling them, you know, one side of this kind of spectrum or the other, right? You got the doom and gloom, um, where I like to say, like, the whole like Terminator, the robots are coming to take over, or the other side of it where it's more of the industry perspective, business, economics, entrepreneurship. We can get rich and become billionaires off of this stuff. Um, it doesn't really seem like there's a solid grounding in between to say like, all right, well, let's just create a baseline and just give people the information, not tell them, give it to them, right? A lot of people will say, and this is going back to the talking head thing. Here's what you should do, right? Here's where you should go. Here's why you should do it. Here's when you should do it. Now, right? Next week. Not the how though, right? Because the how takes more time. The how actually has to have consideration for the human, right? Like as somebody who's worked in education and in leadership in different capacities and done different work with, as a consultant on different projects, You got to listen to people, and you also have to format and disseminate information in a way that meets essentially the need of everybody in that particular party, group, organization, team, right? Like there are, well, we talked about learning modalities and stuff like that. Like there are different ways that we engage and share information. And based on where one person is and their, I guess, best means of grasping information, all right, we got to have consideration for that. Oh, you like to listen, you're more auditory. Okay, great. Oh, you're more, a visual learner. Okay, great. Oh, you're kind of a mix. Oh, you're somebody who's more kinesthetic, like me, right? More hands-on. Like, and you have to figure out ways to actually put those together so that people get basically all of them, regardless of where they would say maybe that they identify most as a learner. That's the difficult part that I think talking heads basically don't I don't say they don't know how to do it, but it's not where they thrive. So not necessarily everybody can really do that, right? The whole, you know, those who can't do teach, like, mm. Another conversation for another day. But yeah, I got some webinars coming up under I Am the Algorithm and Black AI Media, focusing on essentially what I'm ranting and delivering this spiel about, which is more introductory into AI approaches and application. I'm uh, really big on application of things and making it real and making it practical. Um, Implementation is more than just a term or a word. It's an action, and it should be taken seriously. And again, if there's just a lot of the conversation around like, well, some people are going to get left behind. Do they have to though? Like, can you do something about it? Um, and then that's kind of what this initial series of webinars that I'm delivering is going to really pinpoint and target. So thanks for everybody who's already supporting. Looking forward to it. The sessions will be delivered every Thursday evening for 3 weeks, starting on February 13th. So next week, 13th, 20th, 27th, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Get access to that uh, at blackaimedia.com. I guess related to like costs, if people are interested in hearing about that. The cost you can get basically, you don't have to do all three. There are three webinars, 3 sessions. Each one individually is $33, which is numerics for me is important, and I always do numbers like on purpose. Well, one of the primary drivers for the 33 is actually the age, unfortunately, that my mother passed away. So, and I think the 33 is just like a in that context terrible, but there's something about that number. Um, and there's other offshoots and conversations that people can have about the number 33. I'm sure, but there's that. But then if you register for all three, there's a discount, so it gets knocked down $10. So instead of it being $99, you can get it for 89. And then also, you can leverage and use Affirm payments, which is kind of cool. So it's like a payment plan that you can use, and that's anything over $50. So 1 session, no. 2 sessions, yes. So there's that. Um, But other than that, um, a couple of things that I think people should potentially be paying attention to, and hopefully I'm not being just a talking head on this either. But in terms of production and creativity and digging into your own um, era of kind of building and being great. I know a lot of people are talking about um, AI agents. Quickest route to, I think, begin to dig into that a little bit would be, um, using a platform where you can at least create like a custom GPT to get a feel and a vibe for like what that looks like. Because with the agents, it gets a little bit more intricate, where they can kind of do more stuff basically. Just they can actually do tasks like schedule calls and stuff like that. Um, but setting up and starting to get engaged with the custom GPTs, which, if you pay for any of these platforms, a lot of them you can make your own bots and stuff like that. I actually started out, I think some of the first bots I made, which were more education based, and then some of the ones I even did that were initially used with melanated mathematics content, um, was set up on Poe. So it's a platform called Poe.com, POE. You can create bots there. And those, to my knowledge, haven't the bots that are available on in the chatbot collection for Black AI Media. Several of those were set up on Poe, but I don't necessarily know offhand if that platform is still completely free in terms of like just creating those initial bots. I think it is. So you can check that out just to get you know get your hands moving within that space and start actually setting some of these up. Um, so just another alternative potentially, but definitely building these things out for me. Like having my AI personal assistant Rick is really cool and has actually helped, to the point where now, I've been building out and I'll share some kind of what am I calling them? I guess like client scenarios, um, of setting up personal assistants and chatbots for other people, um, in different situations. It's interesting, like doing them for like business owners, or kind of like a boss bot type of thing where people can engage, or one that's more of a knowledge base, for even for customers, and then training on websites and stuff like that, which I'll be sharing more, and definitely doing some information. And actually, in Green Digit Academy, which is the online learning kind of portal that I set up and created. Again, blackaimedia.com. Um, you can go there. There is a webinar that I shared, with how you can begin to create a chatbot, um, using Chatbase. So you can check that out. And if you need support with that, please don't hesitate to reach out. And at the same time, link in my LinkedIn profile right at the top. You can check that out because I just updated that particular page. So focusing more so definitely on the I am the algorithm, helping people build out solutions to you know, problems, I guess you can say, but more so, um, taking ideas and turn them into like real things that are tangible or digital. Um, Things like the chatbots, or creating your own um, merchandise, or of course educational consulting, curriculum, content production, that type of thing. So if it's here, you can get to it through that. But I think that'll be it for this particular edition of the glitch. Um, but yeah, go forward, share something with somebody, help somebody. If you, oh, last thing I will say, because I mentioned it on my last recording of the glitch. Um, if you are in the job market and you feel as though, or have been told, or just know offhand that you need a new or updated resume, I did share a post. Um, I mentioned it shortly on the last recording of the glitch, but I actually did a post of like the actual steps with the prompts that you can use to create an optimized resume using a free version of any of those like generative tools. In generative AI is basically you put in a prompt, I want this, or can you write this email for me, blah, 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 and it gives you the text back. Um, that's what we're talking about, right? Or the ones that say, create the images or whatever, but we're just talking about text output. So you can basically do that using the resume that you currently have. Um, One disclaimer that is included in the post, of course, is be mindful of your personal information and data. Don't put anything into any tool, resource, or bot or whatever that you don't want out into the world. Pretty simple and straightforward. Be careful. Be mindful of what you're putting out. But other than that, take a look at it. Literally save people hundreds of dollars on not having to have a resume done. And there was an article that came out in Forbes that talked about employers actually being like, I'll just use the phrase like they were like okay with having AI optimized resumes, and that was kind of hinged on a lot of the job descriptions and the the job postings are AI generated. So it's funny and kind of interesting to think about using the technology against the technology. But there's that. And then also related to the education and ed tech space for people who are hiring in particular, as well as those who are job seekers. I do have a tool and resource that is currently open source that I created. It's called Cruited, Cruited. You'll see the capital ED like education. So Cruited.io. And what it is basically, if I'm a job seeker in the education space, education technology, whatever, um, I go to Cruited.io. I add my information to a database, just a quick form. Again, try not to be non-invasive with the data that's being requested. So, um, hopefully, not getting like your social security number, or like anything crazy like that. But you basically submit that information. That information then goes to a backend, we'll say, a chat bot for short. And then employers can actually access that bot and say, hey, I'm hiring for a math specialist in Illinois or whatever, right? And based on that, the bot will provide, uh, you know, some of that candidate information. Say, hey, this person's available. Do you want to contact them? And if you have your email address in there, something like that, even like your LinkedIn, they can connect you or connect with you. And believe it or not, people have been and are getting hired using this thing. So, Crude it, check that out. Um, that's it. Time to go to work. Peace.